It's turkey time with me, Katie Seeley. Pie. Everybody loves pie, but does everybody know how to make a pie? Well, today I'm going to teach you, and we're going to make my favorite, which is apple pie. And I'm going to show you how to do the crust, a nice good filling, and then a fun way to decorate the top of the pie before we bake it in the oven. So we're going to start with our apple pie filling. So the best way I like to cut apples, especially for things like pies or cobblers, it's pretty simple. Right down the middle, and then I take a melon baller and just scoop out the core, and that keeps you from wasting all of that nice bit of apple that's right around the core and down the middle. So we've today got a mix of an Envy apple and a Honeycrisp, 2 of each for this pie. It's kind of up to you what you like. Granny Smiths are really nice to bake with. Honeycrisp, even though a lot of people tell you not to bake with, they're actually really nice and they hold their shape pretty well. I would just tell you the few to stay away from are any of the delicious varieties. Red Delicious, Golden Delicious, they're just a little more mealy and kind of fall apart. One way that I keep my apples together a little bit is by not peeling them, because I just feel like we're busy people and why would we waste our life peeling apples when we don't have to? And the peel gives it a little extra texture, a really nice color. So I usually keep the peel on. And then we're just gonna take our knife and cut thin little slices. If you wanted to dice it, you could. So we've got all of our apples cut. And then to go on them, I've got about a half a cup of brown sugar, 3/4 of a cup of granulated sugar, nutmeg, cloves, cinnamon, and a little bit of flour. And what the flour does is the same, some recipes call for cornstarch, it does the same thing. It just helps bind together the syrup from the sugar as it cooks, so it's not so runny when you cut into it. And so we're just gonna add that on top and then mix it all up. You wanna do this kind of ahead of time because the sugars from the apple and the actual sugars in there will start to form, they'll start macerating, which is a word for creating its own sort of sugary sauce. And then we'll put this to the side for when we get ready to fill it. Okay, so the next thing we're gonna do is work on our pie crust. Now the trick here, don't be intimidated, is to work quickly and to not handle it too much. So we're gonna do that by using our food processor. We've got one at home. This is what we have in the kitchen. It's called a Robocoo. It does the same thing. It's just the same mixer attachment like you've got on your food processor. So we're gonna add, there's really 5 ingredients here. We've got flour, all-purpose flour, a little bit of sugar, some salt, cold butter, and a little bit of cold ice water. So we're gonna add our flour and salt and sugar and our cold butter. This is unsalted butter. You wanna use real butter. You can't really work around it and use margarine, but some recipes do call for shortening, sometimes in equal parts with the butter, and that's fine too. And then all we do is we buzz it up in pulses until it turns into like the consistency of wet sand. So the things we like about pie crust is that it's flaky and it's soft, and that happens by not overworking it, because as you work that flour, you create gluten, and that's what makes it tough. And so we don't want tough pie crust. We want it to be really soft and really delicate. Wet sand consistency, there's nice bits of butter still chunked in there, because as the butter melts in the crust, it creates little pockets because butter has a lot of moisture in it. And those pockets create steam, and that's what makes a nice flaky crust. And so we want big chunks of butter in there as much as possible. So then we're gonna add our water. It calls for about 6 tablespoons in this recipe, but it's give or take. So you just want it to where when you hold it in the palm of your hand, it stays in one piece. So you can always add more, you can't really take out. I grab some in my hand and I hold it, it stays together. So we're getting pretty close. So what I usually like to do is pull it out onto the counter at this point and finish working it by hand. So this is enough to make 2 pie crusts. So in our case, we're doing a double layered pie, and so this is gonna make 1 pie. But if you're doing something like pumpkin or pecan where you just need that bottom crust, this will make enough for 2. So as it starts to come together, you feel like it might need a little more water, you can just add a little bit as you go. Always cold water, always cold butter. Pull all the little bits that haven't quite incorporated. We're gonna add a little bit of flour to our board just to keep the butter from sticking. Now, because this particular crust doesn't have a lot of sugar in it, it's a really good go-to for all purpose. So you can make pies with this, but also quiches or pot pies, or use it in a more savory application if you wanted. So what I usually do, because this makes enough for two, is just kind of pinch it down the middle. Then you kind of flatten it out, wrap it in plastic, and put it in the refrigerator. So now we're to the fun part, which is assembling. So I've got one of my pre-made dough. I've let it sit out for about 5 to 10 minutes just so that it's not cold, but still firm enough so that when I work it, it's not mushy. Flour our board and our rolling pin. I usually just take kind of some flour from here and give it a good rub. Then we're gonna slowly work it. We want it to be about 12 to 13 inches around because we don't want it to be too thick, our crust. It's okay if it's not perfectly round. Mine are never perfectly round. No one has to know that. But I always like to work when I'm rolling from the middle out instead of one way, all the way at the bottom, all the way up. It helps you get a little more consistency and thickness. Okay, and then a good way to transfer it from one place to the other is fold it over your rolling pin. And just kind of lay it. So all we're gonna do is take kind of the back fingers of our hands and push it into the corners so that we don't have air pockets underneath our pie. And then we're gonna take a fork and prick it about 20 times or so, because that'll help some of that steam that occurs at the bottom of the pie have a place to escape to, so you don't get big, chunky, cavernous air holes at the bottom. So then we're gonna add our apples. Give them one good final stir, and then we're gonna kind of add it in halves. The first half, and then you're gonna kind of press it down so there's not big holes of air with no apple in it. Now this will cook down, and so you want it to look a little fuller than you think you're gonna want the final pie to be, because these are gonna start to cook down with the heat in the oven. So now we're at the point where if you were doing a streusel topping on the pie, you could just trim the bottom crust up and then add your streusel and right into the oven and be fine. But I think an apple pie looks the best with a really beautiful pie crust top. So we're gonna take our second crust, we're gonna roll it out just like we did before, a little thinner, because we don't want, by the time we have 2 layers of this pie crust around the edge, we don't want this to not be done while the rest of it is overcooked. So we wanna roll this one out a little thinner than we did the first pie crust. There's something very traditional about a lattice-topped apple pie that is a little tricky though to do, because you've gotta cut the pieces and get it just right. So I kind of have a good little cheat code for you for this one. So I have some little canapé cutters. You could just use a small cookie cutter or even freehand it with a knife. And I have one that's a diamond shape. And so I'm just gonna cut out some diamonds in a pattern so it kind of looks like a lattice. So we're gonna do the same thing we did before. We're gonna use our rolling pin to help us transfer our pie. Gonna lay it over the top. We're gonna press it at the joins, and then we're gonna use a pizza cutter to cut off all the extra. So to finish it off, all we're gonna do is we're gonna crimp it. We're gonna take these 2 fingers and this 1 finger. We're gonna push in and pinch. Push in and pinch. Then we're gonna egg wash it, which is just a mixture of egg and water all over the top. And then it's also gonna go into a 350-degree oven for about 25 to 35 minutes, just until the top of the crust is nice and golden brown. And the great thing about using a glass pan is that you can kind of see the bottom. So if the bottom starts to look golden brown, then you know it's been cooked all the way through. So when we're finished, this is what our pie will look like. And so I like that you can see the little bits of apple through the lattice, but also there's a nice little sauce that's been created from all the sugar and flour. Happy Thanksgiving!